I think the moral of the story is sometimes the Salulu is not to be the Lulu. Hey, what's happening? Welcome back to the channel. My name is D, and today I want to talk about the author Audra Winter and the World of Guardian. But first, let me tell you a little story. Back when I was like 21 or 22, I was a musician. I wasn't very good, but I had this like vision in my head of like Jack Johnson type music with Jay Dilla drums. And I played a bunch of like empty bar shows and coffee shop shows and stuff like that. And like every once in a while, a friend would come and listen for a little bit, but not often. And one time I was complaining to my adoptive mother about it. I think we were like hanging out in the kitchen or something like that. I don't remember if I lived with them or not at this point, but I was complaining nonetheless. And I was going on and on and on about how nobody was coming to my shows. And she looked at me and she was like, yeah, okay, that sucks, but if nobody ever comes to your shows, like never, ever, ever, would you still play music? So I'm coming off of like an extended hiatus from YouTube. Since then, I've moved. We're in like a smaller place. I don't have my office space anymore where I used to do a lot of videos. I think that we need some art for this wall behind me, especially if I'm going to keep making videos here. But my wife's in Europe right now, and I'm not allowed to decorate without her. It would be mad funny for her to come home and I just have like this big ass Goku poster behind me or something like that. I should get like a crown painting that sits just perfectly, so every time I'm in this shot, looks like I have a little crown on my head. That'd be funny. And I'm pretty done with the whole like guy who reads romanticy bit. And even when I was like pretty actively a booktuber, I really didn't enjoy doing like this author did this thing type videos. And like people would watch my videos like, oh, you should talk about this author who's behaving badly or this author who's behaving badly. And I just like didn't always want to do that because I didn't really think that I had anything to say. Sometimes it's just like, yeah, racism is bad. I don't like AI. Whatever. You know what I mean? In my last video I put out a couple weeks ago, I was like, I want to make videos that are more about like creativity and pursuing your passions and just stuff that's more aligned with my own interests and where I'm at as a person. So I understand if me talking about an author feels like a step back or I'm like re-pivoting back into booktube, but I don't really want to do that. Or maybe it'd be unpivoting. Either way, I don't really want to do that, but I do think that this topic kind of relates to stuff that I want to talk about moving forward. So that's what we're doing. Because originally I thought it would be interesting to do this video about like Audra Winter and also talk about like what was that Firefest book festival thing, A Million Lives or something like that. I was going to kind of like research both and talk about the through lines, but as I dove into the Audra story, as I started to absolutely feast on all the Audra Winter content that was out there at the time, I realized that Audra Winter and A Million Lives are not really similar at all, and I don't even know if I talk about A Million Lives anymore. But as I was watching all the Audra Winter videos, I noticed that some people, like I was just having a lot of thoughts and insights that I wasn't really hearing from the people I was watching. Not to say that I have a wholly unique or nuanced take. I'm sure somebody else has probably put out a video I just didn't see that might have similar points of view, so I'm just throwing my 2 cents in. If it resonates or you find it entertaining or whatever, that's dope. If you don't, I'm so sorry for wasting your time. But I do think that I have a slightly unique perspective on this because like I've been trying to be an artist my entire life. I don't mean like trying to be an artist like I haven't figured out how to paint. I don't know how to paint. I just mean that I've been trying to have a creative career since I was like 15, 16. So according to Malcolm Gladwell's theory of 10,000 hours, I am a master at being a struggling artist. I have surpassed those 10,000 hours for sure. By the way, I don't actually believe in that. I'm just making a joke. So I want to start this video talking about Audra, but I do want to move away from Audra and talk about something maybe a little bit more generative, more constructive. I don't know. Because I feel like there's enough videos just be like, whoa, can you believe that this girl did this thing? Like, I think it's jump-started some people's YouTube careers, which is, I don't know, good for those people, but, I feel like, building a career off of author drama or booktube or whatever is more exhausting than people think. So I wish them the best. And then before we get into the video, I should also acknowledge, like, Audra Winter is a young, neurodivergent, queer woman. I am none of those things. So if that like renders my opinions invalid to you, no worries. Thanks for clicking on the video. I'm not trying to dogpile on her. I don't want to drag her. Not that I could. Like, she's way more subscribers, followers, whatever than I do. But I feel like sometimes like men, especially like conservative dudes, will see one of my thumbnails and see that there's like a guy talking about like an author who's a woman or a book written by a woman and just assume that I'm about to do a bunch of misogyny or whatever, and then they get like super mad at me for like disappointing them or whatever, which is bizarre. Y'all weird. Anyways, if you've clicked on this video, I'm assuming you've already watched like 8+ hours of Audra Winter content by now. I'll do like as brief a breakdown as I can, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about like some things I noticed in the discourse about Audra. Then I want to talk about some things that stuck out to me about like Audra as a person or as like a creative. And then I want to talk about some like insights and takeaways I have for myself, but I'm going to share with y'all. Hopefully they resonate. So if you want to skip the breakdown or whatever, I'll put some time codes in the description. So I'm going to do a brief breakdown on what's happened. If you want something more in depth, a little bit more thorough, going through like each plot beat, then I recommend a YouTuber by the name of Meredith Novako. I don't know. I'm sorry, but she has a trilogy of videos now that's out, and those are pretty good. If you want like a full review of Audra's book that is kind of like one of the focal points of this story, then the Dr. Frankenstein and My Monster Reads with Rachel has one. And also I really recommend a YouTuber by the name of Jolie Black's video. It's very like, it's got a lot of like nuance and compassion, and it comes from the perspective of somebody who has a lot of like commonalities with Audra, and just like has a really good vibe. I don't know. I like her. She seems cool. So again, I'm assuming that you already know this story. Maybe it's been a long time since you watched any videos about her, because this all happened like couple months ago now, I think. Or for some so maybe you need a reminder, or for some bizarre reason this is your first Audra Winter video. I'm gonna do my best to summarize. Audra Winter is a 22-year-old author, entrepreneur. Her age is important because she brings that up a lot, and that ends up being a big part of the discourse. And back in like 2021, she went viral talking about working on this book that she'd started when she was 12 years old. She talks about the world and how it's based on like the zodiac sign, and she's looking for an agent. At the end of 2021, I believe she has like 100,000 followers on TikTok. And then in 2022, Audra signs on with a literary agent and then disappears in like October. In 2024, Audra comes back and announces that she's going to be self-publishing the book that she's been working on, and that she's no longer with her literary agent. Specifically, like, she says that she was dropped, but as the story continues, those details get kind of muddy, and I don't really know what's true anymore. But the truth is that she is no longer with this literary agent, and she's self-publishing the book. In this time, she's like putting out like a lot of pity marketing type videos, like big Piper CJ energy, talking about not being able to reach the viewers that she used to have, and like chasing virality and all this kind of stuff. And like, in a way, it kind of makes sense to me that you would lose some viewership that way, because like, and part of me is like, well, yeah, if you disappear for 3 years or 2.5 years or whatever, like, you're not going to have the same heat that you did when you first went viral. And also, like, virality doesn't happen consistently. And that's a frustrating feeling for sure. There are definitely times where it's like, I like, even now for me, like, I took 3 months off of YouTube or something, and, I'm not gonna have the same views that I used to when I was posting once a week. But even then, when I was posting once a week, like, I only cracked like 5K views here and there. So it's, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't bring myself up as an example of like success on the internet, because I haven't had that. So Audra had a Kickstarter campaign for her book, and I think she was running out of time, because like with Kickstarter, you need to set like a time and set a goal, and she wasn't going to reach the goal, so she ends up pulling the Kickstarter and said something about wanting to focus on the quality of the book and not like the production and the bells and the whistles part of the book because of the Kickstarter or whatever. And I think that that's kind of funny in retrospect, but whatever. And not long after that, maybe it was like a month, maybe it was like 6 weeks, but whatever, Audra comes back, and the narrative has kind of shifted, and now she's this young entrepreneur CEO with a 6-figure business, which is crazy. And also she has a team. And during this chapter, Audra is kind of reborn as this literary tech bro phoenix person. And even before Audra's book, Age of Scorpius, comes out, she's kind of starting to show that she doesn't really respond well to criticism or critique or feedback, and gets very defensive over even the mildest of critiques, which may not be a red flag, but could have been like an orange flag. At one point, Audra puts out this video saying, according to Malcolm Gladwell's theory of 10,000 hours, she is a master of writing because she's been writing 3 hours a day for like 10 years working on this book. So she's mastered writing because she's surpassed the 10,000 hours. That theory's been debunked, and like even in the book where he says that, he doesn't really back it up with anything. It's just kind of more of like an idea. I feel like a big thing that's missing here is that like you can spend 10,000 hours doing something bad, or doing something badly, also doing something bad, but like you could do something without like actively trying to improve your craft, you know, like, and if you focus all that time working on one thing, you might be pretty good at that one thing. But like, you know, like if I'm drawing nothing but teddy bears for 10,000 hours, I might be pretty okay at drawing a specific type of teddy bear, or or a teddy bear from a specific angle or something like that. But if I'm not trying to broaden my horizons and challenge myself with different mediums and styles or whatever, I'm not like good at drawing. I can just draw a teddy bear pretty quick. If you go to the gym for like a decade but you never increase the weight or increase the speed on the treadmill or whatever, you're not really gonna grow. You're not gonna get any gains. You know what I'm saying? So June 27th, 2025, the book comes out, and reviews start rolling in shortly after that, and they are not positive. Apparently the book reads like it's unfinished. It reads like a rough draft. Some people say that it wasn't edited, and Audra claims to have worked with 2 editors, one of which worked on the Hunger Games. I mean, yeah, she was a contract editor who worked for the marketing team of the Hunger Games, but still, technically not a lie. Misleading, but technically not a lie. There's a lot of inconsistencies in the story that I'm not really getting into, but she like spins things and twists things, and sometimes technically doesn't lie, and sometimes full on contradicts herself, you know. And I have this suspicion that like she did get advice from these editors but did not apply it for whatever reason. Or as Audra kind of says in some of her videos, part of her revision process is to just rewrite the whole thing from front to back, which I don't know if that, which like ill-advised to just start over, because like new problems could arise, or maybe you like don't even remember what you wrote the first time or whatever, and things can change a lot. And I, you know, like I have never written a novel. Like I'm writing a novel right now, but I've never like finished a novel, so I can't speak too much to that. But I know like even with my chapbooks and stuff, I never like scrapped whole poems to rewrite the poems. Usually I would try to rework them and keep certain lines and stuff like that. Part of this revision process that Audra had, because apparently she has a new one that's like 8 steps, and we'll get into that, but like part of that may be like in Jolie Black's video, she mentions that she saw a TikTok from Audra where she says Audra hates her own writing. So it's like maybe rewriting the thing is easier for her because then she doesn't have to like read her own writing, which again, I can understand that. I don't like listening to recordings of myself. Like I don't really actively pursue music anymore, but like watching myself do stand-up comedy is kind of awkward and cringy. But it is part of like how you grow, is you got to kind of look at where you're at and realize that you may not be at your own level of taste, or you may not be where you want to be. But you need to be able to take a good, hard, honest look at yourself and your work. And if you're not willing to do that, I don't know if you're ready to share your work with the world on a professional level. I get the sense that Audra is this kind of artist who doesn't want to do any of the not fun parts of art. And that happens in every art form, I found, like especially like performing art forms. Like I've known a lot of musicians who like straight up don't care about theory at all, or will ignore theory or proper singing form. I know one singer who hates practicing, refuses to practice like with her band. You know, she's like, no, like we'll just do the gig. And the gigs don't usually go great. And I totally understand, because like when I did music, I hated being in the studio. Like if there was a way to skip that whole process, because I hated like having to like sing things over and over and over again just to get like the perfect take, or as close to perfect as I could manage, because I'm not perfect. Sitting there like watching my producer like, you know, dial different things in and dial things back and all that stuff. It was like, it's really boring. It's not fun. but only focusing on the parts that you like or the parts that are easy for you. It's kind of like ordering a salad at a restaurant and then only eating like strawberries and cucumbers out of it and leaving all the lettuce and nuts. So reviews keep coming in, and a vast majority of these reviews are not positive, but they're still like pretty kind, I would say. Obviously, it's the internet. People are fucking mean. So, like, yeah, there were some people being pretty awful. Again, Audra seems to get pretty defensive at the mildest of critiques. So she puts out like this video that talks about like narrative voice and how she like wrote the narrative voice is the way that it is because she writes in like first person and the character is neurodivergent. That felt kind of like a cop-out in my opinion, because like, yeah, you can write neurodivergent characters in a book or a script or whatever, but the narrative voice still needs to be like coherent to the reader, and we still need to be able to follow like the story structure. I haven't read the whole book, but in the snippets I did read, even if you had that narrative voice, I still think that the book doesn't really work on a line level. And full disclosure, in this next part of the recap, I don't know if I have these chronologically correct because I don't have TikTok. So I don't know which comes first, but like Audra puts out a video where she says that her and her team are going to be putting out like a new version of Age of Scorpius that's like revised and it has more art, more charts and guides, and they're going to be hiring an editor from the audience, which they later said they're not going to do that, which is good because you shouldn't. That felt to me a little like if you like ordered a sandwich from somewhere and like you were complaining about how the sandwich, like the meat was moldy and the tomatoes were slimy but also crunchy somehow, and then the restaurant was like, yo, you don't like that sandwich? What if we added different bread? And you're like, yo, I don't care about this bread, bro. The whole sandwich, it's not good, you know? And I think this video comes out after, but Audra puts out this like non-apology video. It has like the aesthetics of a apology video. It has the right tone. It like fits within the genre, but Audra does not apologize for anything ever at all. And on some level, there's part of me that's torn about even talking about like I don't know if you should have to apologize for putting out bad art. I do think that there's a lot of like, I think that she misled some people, and I don't know if that was intentional or what. But I do think she misled some people, and I do think some of like her business practices are kind of shady and stuff like that. And I do think like the way that she gets really mean with people who are trying to offer feedback and critique. But on a scale of authors behaving badly, like she didn't write torture porn about anybody. She didn't hit anybody with a wine bottle. She didn't like allegedly. She didn't like get all of her friends and family to harass and stalk a booktuber who said that their books aren't good because they're not good. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's pretty mild, I think. And also, if you spent money on this book and it turns out it wasn't edited, I think it's totally valid to be upset and feel like you were ripped off because you it would, like, I don't know if I agree, but I could totally see somebody feeling like, well, I wasn't given a finished book. You know, my steak wasn't cooked. I want my money back. Can you tell that I haven't eaten yet today? So then I think after that, or maybe it was during the we're going to revise things. I don't know. What is time? My head hurts. So then after that, I think, I'm pretty sure, Audra puts out this video talking about how her 15 to 20 or maybe it's 6 to 8 employees, or maybe they're just commissioned contractors, I don't know, have this 8-step revision process for each chapter of the book. 5 to 7 of these steps are not necessary. 5 to 7 of these steps are not necessary. And it kind of feels like Audra's doing everything but sitting down and revising the book, like sitting down and really looking at her own writing and sitting down and really like trying to craft the book. You know, like she's really passionate about the world. She's really passionate about inviting people into her world. I don't think she gives a rip about writing. She comes off like she wants to be like a literary producer almost. And then like more recently, some people on TikTok found the World of Guardian on an angel investor site where they're looking for people to invest in the creative studio. That's this multimedia, crazy, amazing thing. and they want like 10 to 70 grand a month to support them, which I guess is to pay the staff that she absolutely does not need. Audra put out another video kind of reintroducing herself and talking about how she's this CEO, girl boss, young entrepreneur who's like pioneering a new form of storytelling, combining art and prose and all that stuff. And by the way, she's not doing that. I feel like someone pointed a lot of videos that I said kind of suggest that Audra doesn't really read all that much and just spends a lot of time like maybe not even writing, but like thinking about her fantasy world, which would make sense as to like why she's not aware of like books that have done a lot of what she's talking about doing. Maybe she will end up coming up with some new format of book, but it does kind of sound kind of like a book with art in it, except that if you skip the art, you won't understand what's going on. But like that seems kind of risky because a lot of people will just skip the art, you know what I mean? And then like gives like this very heartfelt but also not convincing at all bit about being thankful for all the feedback that she got from the backlash that she's not going to mention. And that to me feels like it's an attempt at PR to negate the claims or to invalidate the claims that she's not good at taking feedback. And also there's a bit where like in this kind of era there was an attempt or another attempt to spin the narrative that like the first edition of Age of Scorpius, the reason that it's so bad is the fault of the editors that she worked with previously. And there's a lot there, and it's pretty wild, but I skipped a lot of stuff in the retelling of that story, and still there was a lot to get through. But again, if you want to if you want to go deeper and you haven't already, I really recommend Meredith's video. If you want like a breakdown of the book, Reads with Rachel, and also really go check out Jolie Black's video. So now I want to kind of talk about the discourse around Audra, because there were some things just in the way people were discussing her that I thought was pretty interesting. I'd watch the videos, I'd read some of the comments and stuff like that. Firstly, I think it's really weird how some people were like kind of using the fact that Audra's 22 as like an excuse for all of this. Of course the book was bad. She's 22. Leave her alone. She's a kid. And even when I was doing a lot of like book reviews or whatever, or like just being on Book Talk, because I used to be on Book Talk a lot. I don't even have TikTok anymore, but there's that rhetoric a lot in the internet book world where it's like people really don't respect teens and young adults, you know what I mean? Like, they're like, well, of course they're stupid. And it's like young people aren't capable of creating great art. But as a creative writing teacher, a poetry coach, I disagree. Like, I think young people are very capable of creating really high quality art, you know what I'm saying? I feel like the bar is set really low when it comes to like the creation of media for young people. But that doesn't mean young people are stupid. Like, and I read my students' work, like, yeah, some people churn out stuff that's like on par with Age of Scorpius, but a lot of them also put out stuff that's like almost better than stuff I can write. I just find that like, of course it's bad, it's YA, or of course it's bad, the author is young, is kind of bullshit. Like, young people are capable of producing good work, and young people deserve good work to enjoy, whether that's like books, movies, whatever. And also 22 is not a kid. 22 is an adult. Yeah, a young adult for sure, and may not have all the same experience as somebody who's 52 or whatever. That's fine. But like old enough that they should be able to acknowledge when they've made a mistake, and old enough to acknowledge when they've like behaved poorly in some way, shape, or form. I don't really like saying like behaved poorly because that does feel infantilizing. And I feel like a lot of people are infantilizing Audra and be like, leave her alone. She's just a little baby girl. But she's not. She's grown. You know what I'm saying? Like, she's old enough to be able to be like, yeah, I was acting a little wild there. And yeah, I got pretty defensive and was pretty rude to people and got real mean to that one lady named Rose or Roses or whatever. But yeah, just because you're young doesn't mean you can't make good work. And just because you're young doesn't mean your work is inherently bad. You know what I'm saying? I think it's like almost an industry issue. At this point, I blame the industry. At this point, I do blame the industry, but it's annoying for sure. Another thing I picked up on in like the 9 to 10 hours of content I watched about this fucking situation is this like unspoken belief or this like idea, this conviction that you are either an artist or an entrepreneur. And like that would, and it came up a lot at the point in everyone's videos where they say like Audra doesn't really care about being a writer. She only cares about being a CEO or an entrepreneur or whatever. And for all we know, like someone in Audra's life could have been like, oh, you're an entrepreneur because you're making money off this thing, or you're an entrepreneur because you're a small business owner or whatever. Yeah, she kind of comes off like she doesn't just want her cake and to eat it too. She also wants to own the bakery. But I don't see artist and entrepreneur as two different things in the context of somebody who wants to like do art as their career. Full-time job or side gig doesn't really matter. If you're trying to make money off of your art, I think you need to be both. YouTuber Kelsey Rodriguez calls people like this a creative entrepreneur. I really like the term artrepreneur because I'm a pretentious asshole. And there could very well be some kind of like spectrum between artist and entrepreneur. And right now, Audra kind of finds herself more on the entrepreneur scale. And I think part of that might be that it's just like, that's more fun and exciting to her for whatever reason. And I do really believe that she struggles with the not so glamorous parts of being a writer and author. I think that for her, the editing process feels like she's compromising her vision for her fantasy world and chipping away at that marble of the rough draft to find the story within, or to find the good book within. Feels like she's chipping away at her own soul. So she just chooses not to do that, but isn't really willing to compromise that you gotta do that if you want your book to be like a good product. Because yeah, you could like sell a blank canvas and be like, this is my painting and it talks about the nothingness of life. Or like you're a sculptor and you just sell the slab of marble that you're supposed to sculpt into something. And some people might be into that and be like, ooh, so profound, really making a statement. But most people are going to make, nah, it's that you just didn't do anything. Like getting your art up to industry standards, whether that's like music, a short film, a book, whatever, that's all really not sexy. Even if you didn't want to be a J.K. Rowling meets Elon Musk author executive, you still need to get your book to industry standards. Like even if it's like a side gig, because people spend their hard-earned money on it, you know? I feel like a number of people are worried, especially like indie authors themselves are worried that this is going to make indie books look bad. And I'm sure that it will to some people, you know what I'm saying? Right now, I kind of struggle to call myself a comedian, but I do a lot of stand-up comedy. And I have a very close friend who, like, before I started doing stand-up, like, I just told her that I was gonna start doing it. She was, like, almost sad for me, like almost worried about me, because she'd had an experience going to a comedy show where all these dudes did like really bad crowd work, and some of them were really creepy to her on stage and said some really fucked up shit. So she was like, oh, that's what that whole art form is. And that was her experience. So her like perception of what the art form can be is valid based off of her own experience. Like that's not all of what stand-up comedy is. That's a lot of it in my experience now. And some other friends came to like my first show ever, and it was a rough show, you know, like it was all new comics, and it was exactly what you would expect based off of the context that I gave you. And so they will not be coming to any more shows of mine, and that's okay. Another thing I noticed in the discourse about Audra was a lot of people saying like, oh, well, she should just put out a graphic novel. If she wants the art so bad, if she wants the art to be so integral to the story, then you know, she should just put out a graphic novel. And there's a lot of other things people said, like, she should just do this or she should just do that. And I don't think she will. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think she's really open to people's advice or suggestions. But also, I don't think it would be that simple to just put out a graphic novel, because I don't think making a graphic novel is simple. I've never done it. I've never dabbled. I've never even thought about putting out a graphic novel. That's not something that's interesting to me. But I would imagine that the process is more complicated than people expect. You know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like it's almost disrespectful to that art form to be like, oh, just do blank. I feel like there are some graphic novelists out there who probably feel like, hey, yo, it's like not as easy as you think, you know? It's like, and like some people would say like doing stand-up is just mumbling into a microphone, and it's not. You know, there's more to it than that. Like writing jokes is harder than you might think. It's just like when people are good at the thing, they make it look easy, but it isn't always easy, you know? Like, I don't think we should take graphic novelists for granted, or that whole process. And sometimes it's like a whole team and stuff like that. So I don't know. I thought that was weird. And then like something that stuck out to me about Audra herself, or this whole story, I think the thing that sticks out to me the most is the non-apology video. Audra kind of like goes back to her pity marketing days for a second and is trying to like elicit feelings of sympathy in order to, in my opinion, like deflect or avoid or shut down the criticism that she's getting. And then at one point she talks about like people said like the worst things ever, and I wouldn't be surprised because like I'm not shocked by that because people threatened me because I didn't like Onyx Storm, you know what I'm saying? But again, like a lot of like the stuff is people being more like, I'm rooting for you, I want to see you win, this was a bad move, or like I'm rooting for you, I want to see you win, this book needs to be edited. Like, you know, I feel like now, like right now, people are pretty fed up with her. And so they're maybe not as kind as they were then at the time of her posting that non-apology video. You know, she's like, oh, they say the worst things ever. They say I'm a bad writer. It's like, that's not that bad of a thing. I'm probably getting called worse things in the comment section of this video. This video was pretty concerning to me because, like, Audra never explicitly says it, but she heavily implies her mental well-being and her, like, physical well-being hinges on the success or failure of this book, series, franchise, whatever. You know, like she talks about like not eating, not sleeping and all that stuff. And I like being wrapped up in going viral for bad reasons is never good for your mental health. Going viral at all isn't good for your mental health. Like I've gone viral I've gone like mini viral and gotten like 500,000 views and 100,000 views on a couple of TikToks back in the day. And both times that wasn't good for my mental health. And there's people like, you know, call me all kinds of things, whatever. But if you're like so distressed that people don't like your work, that you're not eating or you're exhibiting other like self-destructive, self-harm behaviors, don't post on the internet. Go to the hospital. Meredith said that in her video, but I just agree. And in Jolie Black's video, she brings up this idea that Audra's fantasy world, the world of Guardian, may be like a paracosm. And a paracosm, I had to look it up, but it's an incredibly detailed imaginary world created in one's mind. And Audra's kind of talked about how this world means everything to her. It's gotten her through some really dark times. It is her whole heart and soul. By the way, real quick, I don't want to talk about like Audra's service animal or her real name or any of that like personal stuff. I don't think she needs to be dragged, and I don't think we need to drag up her like personal life in this discussion. But Audra is talking about like when it looked like Age of Scorpius was going to be really successful, that was like her will to live coming to life before her eyes is pretty alarming, you know. When Jolie was talking about paracosms, she kind of presented this idea that Audra may want this to be her job, to be her life, so that she can spend as much time living in the world of Guardian and as possible, and living in this world as little as possible, because adult life is hard. You know, like she may have been a gifted kid or a smart kid or something where things came easy to her at a point, and now other people are catching up, or like now that she's not a kid anymore, she's expected to like pay bills and go to work on time and all this stuff that may be difficult for her because she's neurodivergent. 9-to-5 life just might not be like it's not good for anyone. Like it's not really in line with human nature, but it's probably particularly difficult for people who are neurodivergent. Like I got a lot of ADHD homies, and like they do struggle with that shit. They still show up and they still do their best, but it is hard for them, and sometimes it's harder for them than it is for me because I'm not autistic and I don't have ADHD. But this series, franchise, creative studio may very well be like a lifeline for Audra moving through adult life. And I can kind of relate to her in some ways because it's like and I can kind of relate to her in some ways because like when I was her age, I hate that I can say that now, but when I was her age, like I really clung to my dreams of being a musician because, you know, I understood that I'd have to work for a living, but I thought if my work was something I enjoyed, it would be a little like life would be a little bit more enjoyable. And I'll talk about this in my next video probably, but a lot of people would make sure that I knew that my dreams were stupid, and they would tell me like life would still be hard even if I was a musician. And I understood that from the jump. I was never under like illusions that life wouldn't be hard, but I just thought if I got to do something that I enjoyed 20% of the time, that would make life 20% better than it was. You know what I'm saying? But I think a lot of writers also kind of have that hope that they can, they have this like romantic idea in their heads that they can spend their time like in a cabin in the woods or walking through the streets of London and going to cafes and writing, their book or whatever, and life is pretty sweet and pretty dope, and if that is Audra's sort of like motivation of like, I want this to be my job so that I can live in this fantasy world, or so I can spend my time doing this thing that I love, which I don't think is writing. I do think it is more like just thinking about Guardian. But if that is her motivation, I can understand that, and I think a lot of people do. It's just like the way she's going about it and the way she's treating people and the way she comes off as pretty entitled to be able to do that rubs people the wrong way. And like the lying and the shady business practices and the not listening to people, all that like rubbing people the wrong way also. But again, I do think people also share that romantic idea of getting to spend their lives doing the thing they love and only the things they love. That's not realistic, like people got bills to pay, people got mouths to feed. You're still going to have bad days even if you're living your dream life. Because even if you do make a living off of your art or you do launch a successful business, you don't get to do a lot of the fun, sexy, cool parts, or at least that your whole life is not the fun, sexy, cool parts. I was talking to a friend who is a therapist. They are not my therapist. They are just a friend who happens to be a therapist. Real quick, sidebar. I don't know about all y'all, but I feel like a lot of people who work in the mental health field have a hard time leaving work at work. And I've full on had to end some friendships with people because I can tell that they're like therapizing me when I'm just talking about my day. And I don't want them as my therapist. I know their life. But I was telling my friend about this story and about like the being defensive with like feedback and spinning the narrative, small lies, blaming other people. And, my friend was like, it sounds like this woman is exhibiting some narcissistic tendencies. And I think on the internet, the term narcissist has become a bit of a buzzword because people don't really take the time to understand narcissism and like, or narcissistic personality disorder or whatever. And I'm not trying to diagnose Audra with that. I'm not trying to put that on her, but it was an interesting thought that my friend had, based off of like, not being able to take feedback, rejecting anything that conflicts with their self-image and their own narrative, unwilling to face reality and not taking accountability. It just reminded me of my sister. Don't necessarily want to put that label on Audra, but I do think it's worth considering that like part of why she may not be taking the feedback or heeding people's advice about like you should get off the internet and maybe just write the book and then come back and see what happens. We sort of frame narcissism like it's a moral failing, but it is like I have narcissistic family members. I was friends with someone who's like a vulnerable narcissist, and I've dated a couple. And I just think so in my own like personal experience, those people don't change or change is very hard for them. But again, I don't think that Audra is a narcissist, and I don't know if I fully buy Julie Black's theory that Audra is just like a young adult who's struggling with adult life, who wants to live in her paracosm. I could be somewhere in between. It could be a mix. I don't really know. To me, she just kind of comes off like, to me, Audra just kind of comes off as like a dreamer who's unwilling to compromise her dream to the point where I almost respect it because it gives like, what if Luffy from One Piece wasn't nearly as charming vibes? And like Audra, and in my mind, Audra's like not that unique because I've seen a lot of indie authors be like, well, I can't afford an editor, so I'm not going to edit my book. What am I supposed to do? Delay my release? And I'm like, Yeah. Now, you like don't have to have an editor. There's no law that says that you need an editor. At least not in Canada, where I'm from. I really doubt there's a law like that in the States. It seems like their government's more interested in banning books than they care about the publishing of them. If you're not willing to go through the editing process, developmental editing, copy editing, it doesn't matter. If you're not willing to like pay for that service or go through that process, like, okay, you put your book out, like Amazon will let you do that. Like you can just put it up on Amazon or Ingram Spark. But I don't think it's reasonable for you to get upset when people say that the book is bad. It reads like it's not edited, or it reads like there's like 18 typos in one page or something like that. If you put out music that hasn't been mixed or mastered, I don't think you get to be upset when people tell you that your music doesn't sound that good. The fact that your art means a lot to you and this is your dream isn't a valid reason to cut corners. If anything, I would think that that's a reason to make sure it's as good as possible. And the fact that your art means a lot to you and it's your dream isn't a reason for people to give you money for it. Like, just because you care doesn't mean they have to. You know what I'm saying? It's nice if they do, for sure, but they don't have to. You're not owed that success. Audra's fantasy world means everything to her. It's what gets her out of bed. It gives her self-worth. It's the most important thing to her. But I think she really struggles with the truth that that doesn't mean it matters to anybody else. She comes off pretty entitled, you know, like she feels like she's owed success. She's owed readers money because this means everything to her. But that doesn't mean it means anything to anyone else, you know? I think her original like marketing campaign and maybe some of the pity marketing, but I think it just tugged on her heartstrings, you know? And some people say that she's like good at marketing, and I disagree. I think that like she got lucky. I think she benefited from a biased algorithm. And often in success stories, which this could have been one, had the book been edited to the point where the book was fine, I think it would have been good. But I think in success stories, people will always sort of like not take account how big a factor luck was. And like, even if it's just you were lucky to be born in the location that you're born in, or that you grew up in the place that you grew up in, or like, hot take, I don't think any success is 100% earned. I do think luck will always play a part in your success. This is another hot take. I'm sure people won't like this, but your art is not about you if you choose to release it. Like, I think people kind of get that mixed up because they try to make Taylor Swift into a demigod or whatever. But I was lucky enough to, when I was a musician, I was lucky enough to talk to an artist who had won a Grammy, I think, at the time he'd won, I think just one at the time we were talking. And he ended up giving me some life advice that I repeat to my students now all the time. And he said, like, when you first start out, anyone who supports your art or like listens to your music or whatever is doing you the favor. Like, if a friend, like when my friends come with me to stand-up comedy open mics, they're doing me a favor. They're being a really good friend. Goal as an artist should be to get to the point where you are giving your audience an experience and you're now doing like an act of generosity. So when you're starting out, regardless of the art form, anyone who supports you and your work is doing you the favor. And I think it's important to kind of approach that with like gratitude, not entitlement. I'll probably do a different video on responding to feedback as an artist, or what to do with feedback as an artist or something like that. But I do think like being really defensive in the face of all feedback or whatever is not the move. And I think like being able to take feedback is a skill that you need to develop before you really put yourself out there, because you're going to get it no matter what. And I've been going for a minute. I'm getting kind of tired. My voice is starting to go. But it's important to respond to people who are supporting your art, especially in the like the early stages or the emerging stages, with gratitude, and to remember that people don't owe you their time, attention, or money. And I think it's also important to show that you care about giving those people the best that you can. Part of that, like if we're talking about writing, is making sure that you edit it. And if we're talking about like performing in some way, like, you know, warm up your vocal cords, practice your guitar chords or your piano scales or whatever. And if you're not willing to do those things to like give people the best that you can, you're kind of showing them that you don't really care about your work, so then why should they? So anyways, this video has taken way longer than I was hoping it would. But real quick, I want to go through like 6 reminders that I came up with for myself while following this story about being an entrepreneur. I'm trying to keep it pretty broad, so it's for like anyone who's like a creative entrepreneur, an entrepreneur, if you will, not just writers. I don't want this to be advice where it's like prescriptive advice or like you have to do these things or whatever. So if any of it resonates, dope. If none of it resonates, sorry. So number 1, keep it real. It's important to have dreams. Like, why else you living if you don't got dreams? But if you want those dreams to become a reality, I believe it's important to face that reality. Be realistic about your budget, not just like in terms of money, but also like your time and energy and what are you able to accomplish. And you may have to compromise in some ways somehow. But yeah, just, get real with yourself about what resources you have and what you're able to accomplish. And take your time and don't rush yourself, which leads me to number 2, be patient and persistent. I think that your work is worth the wait. Sustainable growth for your art career is going to be accumulative and incremental. A meteoric rise to internet fame sounds really sexy and cool and fun, but it's not sustainable and you're going to burn out and fade like a firework. Number 3, take another shot. Sometimes we creatives get really precious about our work. We want it to be perfect because we feel like we only get that one shot, so we'll stand all this time like this and just hoping that we'll get it. But I think that Eminem is wrong, and you actually can take as many shots as you want. Like, creativity begets creativity. So as long as you keep creating and keep releasing your work, like, eventually you'll hit. Like, you might have a bunch of misses, but eventually you'll get a hit. And what's dope, so for me right now, I just recently put out this like short stand-up comedy album. I called it a mixtape, and it wasn't a hit, it was a miss. But maybe down the line, someone will find it and be like, "Whoa, look at this backlog of comedy this guy has after all these different things," and that's cool too, And it's not to say like focus on quantity over quality, but I do think, again, there's a balance between those two, and it's not one or the other. Reminder number 4, look before you leap. Learn as much as you can about the industry that you're trying to get into. Learn about the process of releasing whatever it is that you're trying to release, and learn from artists that have come before you that are like doing something similar to what you want to do. If you write, read, if you make music, listen to music, and consume a wide variety of things, not just the stuff that you like. Learn, educate yourself. And there's a little like extra for number 4. Don't spend too much time looking. Like, I feel like some people wait to be ready to put something out, and that ends up being sort of like a way of procrastinating or putting yourself out there because it's a pretty vulnerable thing. Number 5, trust and respect the process. And a lot of the videos I watched about Audra, they would say like, you need to learn to love the process. And I don't agree with that. I think the process sucks. The process is really daunting. It's a lot of work. And again, it's not cool, fun, or sexy, but it is necessary. And so I don't think you need to learn to love it. It's great if you do, like I really love the process of writing jokes, but I don't love the process of a bunch of other things I do. I hate editing, like videos and stuff. But it is part of it, right? And so you do need to learn to trust it and respect it as a necessary part of putting your work out. And number 6, always remember your why. Why are you pursuing this thing? What do you love about it? What makes you come alive about this artistic process? So when my mom asked me if I would still play music if nobody ever came to my show, she was asking me what my why was. And with me in music, it ended up being that I actually like do prefer to just like chill out and write songs for myself. And I do still love performing and stuff like that, but I think I prefer the connection with people and the conversation with people, kind of. And that's why I think stand-up and poetry are like better art forms for me to perform, but I still love doing music. And that's stuff that I just learned through trial and error and growing up because I'm older than Audra is. But like, it's all, I think it's good to remember and be clear with yourself about the reason why you're doing the thing that you're doing. I think that some people can be a little puritanical about other people's reasons for pursuing art. Like they can be like, oh, she's putting this book out for the wrong reason. She just wants to be a CEO or whatever. And like, that's kind of none of our business, but it's important for each of us in our individual pursuits to be clear with ourselves and almost like be integritous to ourselves, I guess. So maybe you're looking for connections, you know, maybe you are like, you like hosting people and so you want to put on a good show so everyone has a good time or something like that. Maybe you want a fun job. Maybe you're trying to prove your dad wrong. I don't know your life. But whatever your reason for making art and whatever reason you have for wanting to share your art and have art be your job, I think it's good to always keep that close to heart and keep that in mind and let that guide you in your navigating being an entrepreneur. It's really easy to get caught up in positive comments and getting likes on Instagram or whatever other vanity number of social media, money in the bank account, or just like buying into your own narrative that you're going to be the next J.K. Rowling, Walt Disney, or whatever. And maybe that's what Audra always wanted, and maybe she didn't really want to be an author, or maybe she did originally want to be an author and she wants to be like someone that we never heard her mention because she never talked about stuff she likes to read. Whatever the case, it does feel in some ways like Audra kind of lost her why about why she wanted to make the world of Guardian a thing for other people. I don't think I'm going to talk about Audra again unless something like real crazy happens. And I don't know if I want to talk about authors again. I mean, maybe I won't. Maybe this is my last book author drama thing. I don't know. But regardless, thank you so much for watching this video. Thank you to my Plus Ultra Don't Fretters, my top tier supporters on Patreon, Peggy Lou Who and JJ Valdez. Thank you to the rest of my patrons. If you want to help support the channel, ensure that I'm able to create content, get my video newsletter, and gain access to my private Discord server, make sure you consider subscribing to my Patreon at patreon.com/dfretter. If not, no worries, but please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. My name is D. Don't fret. I'll see you next time. Peace out.